Yeah, and it was just, you just keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, it was
and
just survival mode.
Yeah, truly survival mode. And yeah, it was like time paused, and I feel like I couldn't exhale. Like I was constantly just waiting for the next thing to happen. And I remember at one point being like, when am I going to be able to exhale? Like, when am I going to be able to breathe again? And that was like 3 years in.
Yeah.
And then like one day, probably 3 or 4 years ago, I realized one day, I was like, hey, I'm actually breathing.
Yeah.
Like I actually feel like she's going to be okay.
Yeah, because Isla's how old now?
11.
11.
Welcome to the Resilience Reborn podcast. We are your hosts, Angie
and Trey Isla. Each episode, we bring you powerful stories of people who have faced unimaginable challenges and emerged stronger.
We'll find hope together, one story at a time. Now, let's dive in.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of Resilience Reborn. I'm Angie.
I'm Trey.
We are super excited for this episode we have today, and we're so grateful. We have Amy Lux with us today. Hi, Amy.
Hey.
So let's just go ahead and start. We're going to dig right in. Amy, would you please just give us kind of like a your story, a brief, bio story about you and your story, actually.
So I'm Amy. I've actually been friends of Trey and Angie's for a long time.
Yeah.
Just realized today our daughters we gave birth 5 days
I
apart.
know, right? And we didn't even know.
No. Even though we
did know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when my daughter, who's the same age as their daughter, was a year old, she was diagnosed with stage 4 high risk neuroblastoma. And so that's sort of, I guess what we're kind of discussing today, and the impact that it had on our family. And
yes. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's dig right in. Okay. All right. So if you can just describe that moment that you first received the diagnosis and kind of how it set the stage for what was to come.
Okay. So we started, I started to know that there was something going on with her probably about a month before we got the official diagnosis. And I thought she was just sick. So I have a son who's 19 months older than her. So I had, at the time, she just turned 1 and he was 2.5. He had a stomach virus, and then she got it too. And then his lasted 2 days, and she continued. And then she just kind of continued to have weird symptoms. She was having on and off fevers, and then she was like, all of a sudden, like, I realized that it wasn't the same thing that her brother had, which was weird, because then when I took her to the doctor, I was like, I know I sound crazy because he was sick, now she's sick, but like, it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
So I took Isla to the doctor and said, I think there's something more going on than the stomach virus that Elliot had. So they thought that maybe she just had, it was just lingering, like it just caused like some more stomach upset or some inflammation. So they gave her something to like settle her stomach. She seemed to have gotten a little bit better, but then she started doing weird things. Like she was hungry, but then she would eat and then throw up and then like push it aside and like keep eating. And then throw up again. So essentially what was happening is that, I didn't know what was going on. I thought it was maybe neurological. Like I was just like, it's just because I'm a nurse.
Yeah.
So I was like, it's weird how she's just sitting there and then all of a sudden, blah, like she pukes and then she's like starving. Like usually if you're sick with a stomach virus, you don't want to eat. You're like nauseous, but she wasn't like getting nauseous. She was just puking. And then she was like rooting through the pantry all the time. Like she was starving. And then she started like eating weird stuff like sidewalk chalk and stuff like that.
Oh, gosh.
Because essentially what was going on is that she was starving because she couldn't. So she eventually, we found out that she had a tumor and it was pushing on her stomach. So she couldn't digest what she was eating.
Okay.
So it was just pushing it out. And then she was going and trying to fill herself, like she was hungry. So I kept taking her, it seems like it was a long time at the time because I was all stressed out about it, but it was maybe like a week and a half, 2 weeks that I was taking her back and forth to the doctor. And like I said, I'm a nurse, and so I was like, I'm the crazy lady that keeps bringing my kid in, and they keep saying she's fine. And I keep bringing her back and forth. And so they said, okay, well, let's just see, let's, like do some blood work and like a urine test and just see if anything shows up. And so take her and get blood drawn. And then they're like, well, it was not normal, but let's just see if there's, maybe she has like a blockage or something. And so they were like, we'll just send her over. Because I was like, she needs to have like a CAT scan of her head. Like there's something going on, like something big. And her doctor, who was Elliot's doctor too, like I've known him for 2.5 years, the whole 2.5 years that I'd been a parent. But he was like, he's like, I don't think that you're crazy. I don't think that you're wrong, that there's something going on, but like, let's not go to like tumor. Like, let's like look for like smaller things. Cause he's like, don't stop Googling stuff. Let's just like start with the basics. And he's like, let's do a ultrasound. They're non-invasive. We'll just see if there's like a blockage or something. So we set it up for the next day, and she was like, she would go back and forth. Like sometimes she would be okay, and then other times it was like I would worry more about her. So, and this was in July. So the next day we had scheduled the ultrasound for first thing in the morning, and then we had like this pool play date planned with some friends. So I had the pool bag packed, and I had all this cooler of snacks and everything packed, and I had it in the car. I dropped off Elliot with my parents and took her to the ultrasound, and then she had the ultrasound, and then the tech just sort of silently walked out of the room, and I worked with her, so I knew her, and I was like, she found something, and then I was like, okay, cool, good, she found something, like,
Some
like,
answers.
And then she came back in, and I could just tell, like, and I was like, what's going on? She's like, well, we found something, and I'm like, okay, cool, and she's like, your doctor wants you to go back to his office. And I was like, okay, when? And she's like, now. And I was like, well, what is it? And she's like, well, I'm not really allowed to say. And I was like, well, I mean, is it like, what is it? And she's like, well, it's a mass. And I'm like a mass of what?
Yeah.
Like it is a blockage? Like it's a, And she's like, just go over to your pediatrician's office. So and it's like literally across the street. So I drove over. And like he was waiting at the desk when I walked in. So like then I'm starting to think, okay, there's something, like she's going to need surgery or something. So then I go, and then he's like, come on back. And he brings me back to a room, and he like pulls a chair over, and he like sits down, and he like looks at me, and I'm like, oh, what the hell? And then he's like, so they found a mass. It looks like the placement of it. It looks like it's neuroblastoma. And like, I had heard the word before in nursing school and stuff like that, but and then as I sat there thinking about it, I'm just like, I mean, okay, what is that? And he's like, well, so it's a tumor on the adrenal gland, which is it's a nerve cell cancer, but it also could be a tumor on her kidney, which is a different type of cancer called Wilms. And I'm like, so you think that it's cancer? And he's just like, well, we're going to have you go over to the hospital and run some more tests. And he's like, so he's like, go home and pack a bag for a while. And I was like, okay. And then he's just like, are you okay? Like, do you need, and I'm just going through like, okay. And then he's like, do you need to call somebody to come get you? And I was just like, oh, like I should be really upset. Like, it was just taking a while for it to like,
kind of like shock.
Yeah, because at first I was like, cool, we found something. Let's do something about it. And then in my head, I'm like, okay, so there's a tumor. Like, so shoot, like she's going to have this thing surgically removed. Like that's what the extent that and I was like, man, that's really sad. But like, I wasn't like, okay, she's one. Like it didn't occur to me that like she could have cancer that was like spread all over her body.
But that sounds like just like a positive mindset to me though.
I guess.
Right?
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's just me. because like, I mean, why assume the worst?
The worst.
The worst.
Yeah. So I'm just sitting here like, and then I'm reading like his tone and I'm like, okay, it's serious. So then I'm like, I call my mom. I'm like, I'm going to get Elliot. I have to take her to the hospital. They want her to see an oncologist. And she's like, what? And I'm like, well, they just need to keep, they need to look at it more, run some more tests. And I don't actually remember much more of that conversation. I just remember everybody being like, well, are you okay to drive her home? And I'm like, well, yeah, like, so then like, I think as I was driving home, it was sort of more settling in and I was sort of understanding that it was more than, because like he said, you're going to be there a while, so pack a bag. And so I got home. I don't remember really the drive home. I think I was just processing. And then I got home and I called my husband and I said, there's something wrong with Isla. We have to take her to the hospital. They said, we're going to stay for a long time. I need you to come home. And for some reason I put her in, I was like, she needs to take a bath. So I put her in the bathtub and I was just, it's like I knew, it's like I was telling myself that it wasn't that bad, but then I also knew that something was this was going to be her last normal bath in her bathroom. Like, yeah. And so, and she was still, I mean, she was a baby, like she just turned 1. And it was like, I just was like looking around her nursery and I'm like, yeah, I feel like I felt it. Like I was like, it's bad. Like we're not going to be back here for a while. So I took my time. Like I was just like, I'm going to just sort of give her a nice bath, pack her bag slowly and wait for him to get home and just not panic because I didn't want her to panic. And she actually she was fine the rest of that day. And so we took her in and they did more tests, and then they came in and they said, we're 99% sure it is the type of cancer that we were hoping it wasn't. And there's a whole lot of other tests that need to be done to really know what the process or what the treatment plan is and what the prognosis is. And so then it was just all this, like it was like test, result. And it was like every result was it was the worst case scenario, like every time. It was like, okay, so she's got this marker and this, that, and then the next day they had her scheduled for surgery to go in and take a piece out to really stage it and all that stuff. And so it was all of a sudden just like this big, it was just like one test and like holding our breath and until we knew the result. And then it was like, okay, absorb that one. And then we're still waiting on this test result though. And it's like, okay, that one didn't come back good either. And it's like, okay, like what's going on?
How long were you in? So during all that, you said you had to stay longer. How long were you actually in?
So we got there that same day. The next night is when they took her to surgery and like actually took part of the tumor out. And they said because of the size and placement of it, they couldn't like go in and just take the tumor out. Like it was wrapped around her organs and her aorta and all this stuff. So they're like, we just are going to take a sample. So they did that. And then all of a sudden, like she was just ill. Like when she woke up from surgery, like she wouldn't talk. Like she was like, she just like, I was just like, she's like dying right in front of us. Like it's like she was all of a sudden like just spiraling. And I'm just like, and they're like, yeah, she's really sick. And I was like, I mean, I knew she was sick, but like she was not like this yesterday. Like what are you guys doing to her? Yeah. But they were like, no, she's got a big tumor and she's probably had it for a long time. And it's just gotten to where it's killing her. And so we need to start chemo right away, but we have to do all these other tests before we can start chemo because we need to know what kind of chemo to give her. And so, and they're like, we need to do more tests to see if it's spread anywhere. And I'm like, she's 1. Like, how could she have cancer that's spread anywhere?
Right.
And they were like, well, we just have to make sure. And so then they take her for that test and then they come back and they're like, well, it's not in her hips. And they were like, it's in her skull, her spine, her arms, her legs. Like it was everywhere.
Like all the worst spots.
Yeah. So they were like, so we have to transfer her to Children's Hospital because that's where they're doing this experimental protocol, and we think that's the best chance. And my mom and dad will tell me over and over, and I don't remember the conversation, but they told me that the oncologist that day said, there's a 30% chance that it'll work. We wouldn't blame you if you decide to not treat it, if you decide to just take her home.
Oh, wow.
And I don't remember hearing that option.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
No.
And so what I heard was that 30% of people that have it beat it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, why,
That's going to be her.
So, that if 1% did, then
Yeah, like, is that even, like, what kind of option is that? Like, you're going to tell me a 0% if I take it home, or 30%?
I guess she said that he said, we could go through all of this chemo and radiation and surgery, and then, there's only a 30% chance that she'll make it anyway. So, like, you have to decide if you want to put her through all that for a 30% chance. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember that was an option. But,
Right. Yeah.
So, 30% that you're going to lose, or 70% chance that you'll lose your second child.
Yeah.
Like, is that, like, what is that? Is that just take your breath away, or is that like, we just need to get this done? Or, like,
yeah,
what
I
is
think
the
I
mindset
just,
there?
like, at that point, like, I think I just went into, like, a survival mode for her. Like, I was just like, well, if she's gonna beat it, like, she's got, like, I have to believe she's going to.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
because that's what she's gonna believe.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like I said, like, they just kept doing more tests, and every time it was just like, oh yeah, it's, wasn't a good result. Like, the only good news they gave us was that it wasn't in her hip
hips.
bones.
Wow.
So we started chemo, and I was like, well, if there's a chance she's gonna beat it, then she's gonna do it.
Yeah.
Just through the treatments, kind of fast forwarding a little bit, so when you were going through the chemo, did everything kind of stay the same? Did it go down? Did it go up? Like, how was the first part of that journey?
So, yeah. So the journey like I said, like, when the doctor first told me she had cancer, I'm like, oh, that's terrible. But, like, I was just in my head, like, oh, she's gonna have to have a tumor removed, or, like, she's gonna have to have, like, a couple doses of chemo or something. Like, she's this big. Like,
Yeah.
how bad can it be? So I was just like, oh, okay, like, this is gonna be like, and no, I think one of the things I asked the doctor is, like, he goes, there's treatment protocols for it, though. Like, he's like, I think this is what it is. It's not good, but they're doing a lot of research and finding a lot of things to do for it. And I'm like, okay. And I was like, well, like, how long is she gonna be, like, in the hospital or ill? Like, and he was just like, it could be, like, a year or two. And that was another thing, is when I got home and I was just like, okay, I want her, like, I want to just, like, stay calm, like, pack up and just, like, have a day at home before we're not at home for who knows how long.
Right.
But then I remember thinking, like, okay, how am I, like, I can't work. Like, I remember one of the things I said when I called her dad was, we're going to lose our house. Like, how are we going to, like,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, like, we had insurance, but I'm pretty sure this is going to, like, break us.
Right.
Like, which you find out that there are a lot of things to assist. And that was one of the good parts that people come out of nowhere and help out. And so, but yeah, so I'm like, okay, this is going to be, like, a terrible year or two, but it ended up being like 4 years.
Right.
So, because, yeah, there's a protocol, but we met through her treatment. I don't know how many, maybe 20, 30, 40 other families of kids with neuroblastoma.
Oh, wow.
From all over the world. And everybody's case is different.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's was the same. And so they have, like, this one protocol that they follow, and if it doesn't work.
Oh.
Yeah. So she started on this protocol, and she had, so before they would even attempt a surgery to take the tumor out, they do 4 rounds of chemo, which are like a week of chemo and then 3 weeks off, where they recover from the chemo, and then another week and then 3 weeks off. So it was like 4 months. And then she was getting better. Like, she seemed better. She was able to eat. She finally did start to come, like, first month, I would say, she was just sick. Like, she just was like, she didn't want to get up. Like, she was like mad. She wouldn't look at me. She was mad at me. Because like I brought her there.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know, like, I was supposed to protect her, and I brought her there, and she wouldn't look at me for a while. And then actually they had, at the children's hospital, they had music therapists that would come in, and they would come to the door, and I'd say, she's sleeping. Like, she just needs to rest. And I would shoo them away. And then finally they were like, let me just come in, and like, I'll just sing soft, you know, and she perked up.
Yeah.
And like, that was from the, like, she waited for the music therapists, and then they had dance therapists at the hospital too. And so it's like, she started to come back to life.
Yeah.
But then I thought the chemo was working because she was getting better, or seemed better. She was eating, she was playful again. Like, I was starting to see her again.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, so we're kind of excited to do
Yeah.
the second round of scans to see, you know, how much it had improved. And because you would hear sometimes of kids who, like, they would do 4 rounds of chemo and their tumor, like, shrank down to, like, nothing.
Oh,
And
okay.
it was like an easy surgery, or they didn't even need the surgery. So we take her in for that, and then she comes out, and they're like, it's the same size. Like, it didn't, it didn't change. They were like, it's maybe like, so the tumor was like 9 centimeters by 7 centimeters or something. So like a grapefruit.
Yeah.
And she's like this big.
Yeah.
And they were like, it's about a half a centimeter smaller each way. And so we think we should just continue with this protocol because it's working. And I'm
Right.
like, okay. And so the next step was supposed to be surgery. So we meet with the surgeon, and he's like, well, it's still this, like, it's not easy to access. So I'll just go in and, like, essentially he was telling me he was just going to go in and, like, cut it up and, like, take what he could and then just keep doing chemo to make it to, and I'm like, but the chemo's not really doing anything to it now. So what makes you think if you go in there and just, like, cut pieces out and leave it, like, that it's not just going to spread? And so I did research, and I kept coming across where they would do those types of surgeries and they wouldn't get it all out, and that it would just open it up to start spreading more. And I just had, like, I was just like, I don't think
You didn't want
this
that.
is-
Yeah.
I don't think. And then I asked him, like, how many of these surgeries have you done? And he was like, oh, maybe like one or two a year. And I'm like, okay. So I went home and I researched, and I found a surgeon in New York City at Sloan Kettering, and I called them the next day, and they called me back, and they said, send her records over. And so I called her oncologist, and I said, can you send her records to Sloan Kettering? And they said, we'll send them if you want us to, but we don't think that she'll survive the surgery there, because they're going to be really aggressive, and they're going to try to take the whole thing out. And it's just not, you cannot take that whole thing out. And I said, well, I want to take her. I feel like I need to take her for a consult, because this guy does this surgery like every day.
Yeah.
Right. More than 2 times.
Yeah, people from all over the world go to him for it. And they were like, well, she's going to lose her kidney because it's so close to her kidney. Then she's going to be on dialysis and blah, blah, blah. And then they were like, I just really think that it's not a good idea for you to take her, but it's your choice.
Right.
So I took her, and it just felt like he knew what he was doing. And he said, you know, can I promise you that I'm going to be able to get the whole thing out? No, but that's my goal. I'll get as much as I can out safely. So it was like, when we went, it was like, okay, this is it. Like, this is what we need to do.
Yeah.
Like, it was just very.
You felt that.
Yeah. Like it was, I truly feel like I followed my gut.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what else?
What?
Like,
Right.
Yeah.
What
Like,
else
you
are you
have to
gonna
make
do?
all these decisions, and people are telling you different things, and it's just like, at some
Yes.
point I'm just like,
You have to make a decision.
yeah, and at some point I'm just like, I just gotta, I gotta go with something.
Yes.
So we took her there, and this was in December, so this all started at the end of July, so like 5 months later, and he took her in, and she was in there for 12 and a half hours, I think, and
Oh my
and
gosh.
he came out and said, I think I got all of it. And then they did a scan the next day, and the whole entire, like the tumor was like, it didn't light up anymore. Like the tumor was gone. She still had everything in the
Yeah.
bones, but he took the whole thing out. And so that, like, there's statistics for all these different things. And so like being able to get the whole tumor out is like it like makes the statistic better.
Yeah.
Right.
So then after that, they wanted to do radiation on the area to make sure that there wasn't any cells that could start to grow again. So they did radiation. Then they did injected radiation therapy where they like to target the spots in her bones.
Okay.
So they inject a radiation or radioactive material that is supposed to attack all of the cancer cells, but it's like not selective. So it just like went all through her body.
Right.
And then she was radioactive. So they put her in like a lead lined room. They sedated her through it because like we couldn't be around her.
Oh yeah.
We had to go in with like these suits on to change her diaper.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
it was for like the injection. I think the injection was like a day or two, but then she was like, they had to just keep checking her radiation levels before she could come out of that room. And then once she was safe enough to come out of the room, she wasn't safe enough to go home to her brother. So we had to go to a hotel. And then it was crazy. Then they give us this card, and it's like when you're driving home, you might get stopped for radiation. Like
What?
yeah, like this card, like explaining why my kid was radioactive.
Oh my
Because
gosh.
we might
Amy.
get stopped at
Yeah.
the state borders for like having radioactive material or something.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's like nuts. So that actually did help with the stuff in her bones. And then they were like, okay, we think for the rest of it we should start doing more chemo. And I was like, the chemo didn't really help, and it made her really sick. And like, if it was obviously helping and making her sick, okay. But like, I was like, I want to see what other options there are, and I don't want to. She's not responding to your protocol.
Right.
And they kind of were like, yeah, I mean, if she doesn't respond to the protocol, then that's really all there is. And so I went back to Sloan Kettering, where the doctor that did
Right.
take the tumor out was, and I met with the oncologist. He was the surgeon, but I met with the oncologists, and they're like, yeah, we try to do as little chemo as we can, especially if it's not working. And they were doing an experimental immunotherapy. So it's an antibody therapy that attacks the cancer cells, but it also attacks the nerve cells because it can't distinguish. But it basically tells your body that they're foreign. Like I guess that they explained it like it tricks your body into thinking that it's like a bacteria or something. So
Okay.
it will fight those.
Oh, okay.
But they're like, it's a painful procedure, and it's like 3 times a week. I can't remember. It's like 3 times a week. No, it was 5 days a week, once a month.
And this was in New York?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so she would go in, and they would inject this thing, and it was like immediate, like excruciating nerve pain. And so and they were only doing this procedure in this area of the hospital. And so it's like lined up like 4 rooms on each side of kids having this, and it's like you hear just these kids being tortured.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That was probably the hardest part of all of it,
Sure.
is like watching, like knowing that yeah.
Oh, I couldn't imagine.
So, but that worked. And so she was down to like 1 spot in her skull and 1 spot in her spine, I think. And then,
And what's this timeline now?
and so now it's the next summer. So it's a year later.
Okay.
And she's almost clear.
Yep.
And then so we do another set of scans to like see how much more they want to do. And then they found a new spot in her leg.
Yeah.
So then it was a small spot. So it was a small, but it was a relapse. So they had to start the process over
Back
again.
over.
So they gave her high dose chemo again. And then they did radiation on her leg. The radiation, it worked. But at that point, they explained that once neuroblastoma relapses, your survival rate goes down to 8%. So from 30 to 8.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, but so she responded well to that, and then they started that immunotherapy, the painful
Yeah.
thing all over again. And they did that. I can't remember how. I think she had 9 rounds of that. So 9 more months of that. And then after that, she was finally clear. And then after that, they did another experimental, because it's got such a high relapse rate that actually it was like, okay, now what? Because like, we're done with this, but like we can't just do nothing. Because,
Right.
Like,
Sit around and wait.
Yeah. So they were developing a vaccine for it. So she went, I can't remember how many injections it was, but we would go again. It was like once a week for 3 weeks, and then once a month for 6 months, or I can't remember, but she would go and get these vaccines.
So going through all this, and you gave a little bit of a timeline, but you had mentioned before that you thought you might lose your house. You thought, it was going to be very hard on you financially with work. So for people listening that might be maybe getting ready to go through something like this, and that stuff is on their mind. I know it's like in the back burner of a lot of people's mind, but how did that work out for you? What did you do to get through that part of it?
I think it was just, well, yes, it crossed my mind at first, but then it's just like, but there's no other option. Like,
Sure.
And I would then, like, our family was just like, well, if you have to sell the house, you have to sell the house. You move in with us. Like, it's just, this is what we have to do, But yeah, so as soon as she started treatment, there was a social worker that came in and gave us a list of resources. And
So there are resources
Yeah.
out there for people. Okay.
yeah, and fortunately too, a lot of the experimental stuff was
Yes.
not free, but like they helped. They helped with a lot of the experimental stuff. So it just worked.
It works out, right?
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah.
have bigger things to worry about.
And then like when we needed to, like friends would step up and do fundraisers and. I mean, it just like people came out of nowhere and were just like, what can we do to help? And I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. And I truly, like, I didn't want to go around asking for help, but I also didn't know what I needed. Like, it's like, people are like, what can we do to help? And I'm like, I don't know.
Like you're brand new to this.
Yeah. Like I have no clue. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, I would venture to say that just anybody offering anything that they could was helpful.
Yeah.
And I can imagine it was all like a blur, that.
Yeah, it was. And it was funny because people that I wouldn't have expected to come out of nowhere and just
They did.
help or just know what to do to help or just do whatever they could think of to help did. And then there was people that like I kind of would have expected to that were like, oh, we just want to stay out of the way. Like we don't know what to, It's like,
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I don't know. It was,
I feel like that actually is with anything in life, any hardship or
it's
grief
and it's interesting. And at first, like my feelings were hurt by some of it, but I think it's just that some people just don't.
They don't
They
know.
don't know.
They don't.
Yeah.
They don't
Yes.
know.
Yeah, I think so
They don't
too.
know
Yeah.
what to say. They don't know what to do. They
Yeah.
want to give. Well, they're probably busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
So that-
uncomfortable with it too.
Yeah.
Was it like everything was on hold?
Yeah.
Like,
it was.
like you had, I'm sure you had all of these like visions and plans and things that you thought, and did it just stand still?
The pool bag
Yeah.
stayed in the back of my car for like 4 years because I didn't want to unpack it. Like I was just like, I just kept pushing it. Like I kept it packed because like I was like, we were supposed to go to the pool.
Yeah.
Like that's for like 4 years. I'm like, we were supposed
We're
to
just
go to the
gonna
pool.
go.
Yeah, we're going to the pool.
You just wanted something normal
Yeah.
and to
I
go
know, and I
have
had
a
to
play
call our
date.
friends and say, we can't come to the pool. Isla has cancer. And she's like, I'm sorry, what? Yeah. It's
Words
just,
that you thought you would never have to
and
say.
That's just, I mean, that's just what it was. And so, but yeah, it was like, everything paused. Yeah, and it was just, you just keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, it was
and
just
doing
survival
what
mode.
Yeah, truly survival mode. And it was like time paused, and I feel like I couldn't exhale. Like I was constantly just waiting for the next thing
Yeah.
to happen. And I remember at one point being like, when am I going to be able to exhale? Like,
Yeah.
when am I going to be able to breathe again? And that was like 3 years in.
Yeah.
And then one day, probably 3 or 4 years ago, I realized one day I was like, hey, I'm actually breathing.
Yeah.
Like I actually feel like she's going to be okay.
Yeah, because Isla's how old now?
11.
11.
Now, so what was that? What was that point to where it's always going to be in the back of your mind? I can imagine. But what was that point to where it was like, okay, we're really making a nice trajectory now. Let's try to start to normalize things. Do you remember?
It was a difficult
specific?
transition. So once she was done with all of the treatment, it was like, okay.
And that was how many years?
So she was diagnosed right after her first birthday, and she finished treatment on her 4th birthday.
Okay.
And then I think that's when she started the vaccine therapy. So it was like she did that for the next year. So it was her 5th birthday that we were done with any treatment.
Okay.
And it was scary. Like it was like, okay, like this is all we know now. Like, I mean, it was years of just, what's next for Isla? What's next to keep our kid alive?
Yeah.
And so then they were like, okay, yeah, we're done. And they're like, we'll she'll come back every 3 months, and we'll, do scans and bone marrow biopsies, and we'll just do, we'll do a checkup every 3 months. And then it was like, okay, I think we could move to every 6 months. And I'm just like, what do we do in between? Like,
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
like how do
because you had to be scared to death. Like,
Yeah.
no, I need scans
it's
every
like,
so
I won't
often.
be able to breathe.
Right.
Yeah. So, but they were just like, this is it. I mean,
This is how it goes.
Yeah. Like the further she gets, the further out she is from being clear.
Yeah.
The better her odds are for not relapsing. And then of course you hear every now and then of somebody relapsing, 7 years later or something, and you're like,
And that's in your head. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But they say after 5 years, it's like the rate goes way down.
Oh,
So-
okay. Okay.
So I think really after like 5 years and that was when she turned 9, was when she was 5 years cancer free. And I think that's really like we had a party for her and everything, and it was like, I think that's when I really felt like, okay, I think there's always,
Yes.
there's always a chance. And especially like there's secondary, and she actually had a secondary cancer too when she was in kindergarten. They found it was like a blood cancer that was a result of her chemo. So it's like, it's like, okay, right when she was completely done and
Right.
that happened,
Right.
but it's not a relapse. It's a different cancer. And so it's like, I'm like, they're like, this is better than a relapse. And I'm like,
Okay.
Better. Right.
yeah, the good cancer. So then we had to watch that for a while, and then they were going to do a bone marrow transplant. And so we moved to New York because she had to stay there for like 3 months.
Right.
And then when we got there, they redid all of the bone marrow biopsies to see how much chemo she needed to start it. And they were like, it's actually getting better on its own. And I was like, okay, so like what, like how often does that happen where they don't? And then they're like, we've never seen it.
Oh wow! So it's almost like her body's just like, I'm fighting,
Yeah.
no matter what it is.
And
That's
they're like,
amazing.
what are you doing at home? I was like, feeding her really well. Like, the only thing that I can do the only thing that I could control is like keeping her body healthy.
Right.
And so like I was kind of a nutcase about like what she ate and making sure that she got enough
Right.
protein and.
But you
Yeah.
controlled your attitude though, which is what I've seen through your whole story is it's always
Phenomenal.
positive and what can we do to move forward.
Yeah.
It's you don't get stuck on one particular thing. It's like, okay, this is our next obstacle.
Yeah.
And I think that's big.
At some point, like in her first hospital stay, I feel like I remember, and I don't remember like who it was. I don't really remember the conversation otherwise, but I remember somebody saying like, don't let her see you upset. Like, yes, this is hard, but she doesn't know any different. So cry in the shower, cry in your pillow, but
Don't do it in front of her.
it in front of her, because if she thinks this is just normal, then it's normal to her. And
That's great advice.
it is. It is.
It's hard.
I would modify the advice though, because because I never let that go, and so like I truly do believe that it helped her, because yeah, like she would look to me, like she would feed off of how I responded to the doctors or how I responded to her being sick and I just feel like a positive attitude has a lot to
Yeah.
do. Like
Absolutely.
I saw families when we were in the hospital where the parents were just beside themselves, and they were just like we're not going to make it. Like we're not, and the kids didn't do as well because they didn't believe that they could. Yeah. And so, and the parents would give up and the kids would give up. And not just 1-year-olds, like there was teenagers and stuff. And it's just like, there was you could always tell like that there was when they felt like they were doing well, they were doing well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I feel like during the whole thing, like my main goal was to just make the kids, like just to keep things as normal as we could. So I still tried to like plan, play dates when she could and trips and so really, if you ask Elliot, her brother or her, like I don't think that they didn't really know that it was abnormal. And as a matter of fact, Elliot once, when he was like 3 or 4, he said, when I was little and I had cancer. So he just thought it was a normal part of babies. Like that's just part of, like when you're a baby, you have tubes hanging out of your chest that you get chemo through when you go for blood transfusions every week. And he just, because it was so normal to him that's just what he thought.
It's not a big deal, right? In their mind.
He's like, when did I get my port taken out? And I was like, honey, you didn't have cancer. And then there was, and I was just so worried about them.
Yes.
So it was like, I don't want you to be jealous of her cancer now, because now you're like, oh, okay, now she's special because she has cancer. And so it was like, everything was like, okay, let me research like how you respond to this. And there's usually
there's
not
so
an answer
many
though.
different,
Yeah. So again, like I just.
And now, is he affected by this at all?
I've taken him to therapy quite a few times, and they're just like, he's really just very adaptable. And if there's any, issues of like resentment, it's all normal sibling stuff.
Okay.
But luckily, and it's not always that easy. He was 2, so we just brought him along.
Yes.
Like he was always there. We didn't leave him out. We didn't, make him stay with other family. Like he was as much as he could be there, except for overnight.
Right.
He was there as much as he could.
Gotcha.
And then I still put him in preschool and like tried to keep all of that normal. And we just kind of did the best that we could to make him feel included, but also have like some normalcy too. And he's just a easy kid.
Yeah.
Like, so almost too easy, where there were like, sometimes I'm like, what do you need?
I know. Yeah.
Can I please be your parent?
Yeah.
And I still worry that like one day he's just going to be like, you never paid attention to me,
Right.
But,
yes.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's always going to be in the back of your mind.
And I can imagine that, you were there. You were very strong for Isla, for your family, for yourself. But there had to have been those moments to where it's just like you just wanted to cry or scream or just it was almost like you were trying to be somebody strong for Isla, for everybody. But what about you?
Yeah. So that piece of advice, that was good advice, where it was like, be strong in front of her, be positive in front of her. I didn't allow myself to really, yes, I was scared at times. Yes, I was, but I think I like blocked off the emotional part of it. Like I blocked the feeling anything. And so like, I think that I do still think that's good advice. Like, so if I were to meet somebody who's getting ready to start this whole journey, stay positive in front of your kid. Seriously, cry in the shower. Like seriously, like stay in touch with like, this is hard. Like you should be mad. You should be sad. You should feel all the emotions, and you got to make sure you still are feeling them, even though you're not showing them in front of your kid.
And you say you did not do that.
No.
And so do you think that's had an impact later, like now, or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was, and I think I started to kind of say that after she finished treatment and it was like, okay, now what do we do?
Yeah.
Then I started to have a lot of anxiety issues where it was like, I'm still trying to survive. And she's like, I survived.
Right.
And I'm still like, okay, but like I'm still in this mode and I don't know how to get out of it. And so I'm like still like, it's like the storm passed and I'm still standing out there with my umbrella up, like, okay, like we're still in it, like I'm looking like a crazy person. But yeah, so I started to have a lot of anxiety, and so I went to a therapist and just, you know, going through sort of how I dealt with the emotional part of it. It was like, okay, you didn't. Like it's like I sort of, and I think I've done this before in previous parts of my life, where when things are hard, and that's probably why I was good at it for her, was that I just sort of would like dissociate and like just go through the motions and just cut off the emotional side of anything. But then it's like you can't cut off fear and you know, and sadness and grief and then still feel joy and happiness and you know, it's like you can't selectively
You have to cut it all.
yeah. And so that is it's still a process of me relearning different emotions, and it's uncomfortable. But
so I mean, there is even it's such a wonderful story with Isla making it through all of that stuff, but there's still grief to be had. There's still grief in the process, even if there's a great outcome.
So this past Mother's Day, all of a sudden, like I just had this, like the day was fine, but all of a sudden, like I just broke down, and I was just looking at motherhood, and I was just like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And I was like, all I ever wanted to be was a mom. Like if you ask my parents, like when I was a kid, like as far back as they could remember, like as far back as I could talk, if they asked me what I wanted to be when I grow up, I would, and they say it with a lisp, I would say somebody's mom. And so it's like all I ever wanted to be was a mom. And then it's like, like her, like, and I wanted a boy and a girl, and I had a boy and a girl. And I wanted to braid her hair and like take her to dance lessons and do all these play dates and be the room mom and the neighborhood mom, and like I just wanted to be a mom. And then I'm like, I didn't want to be the mom of a sick kid, but here I was. And so I was trying to do both at the same time. I was like trying to still have, but so I just, recently I was just like, it was like, I'm all of a sudden, like I was like grieving the loss of the life that I thought I was going to have. And
at that point in time, right?
Right. Yeah. And it's like, I have now 3 beautiful kids.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's like there was a point where I just kind of
well, that wasn't supposed to be your life.
Yeah. Like when I look back and I'm like, I was going through the motions, but I wasn't I wanted to be the mom that enjoyed her kids and sat down and played with them. And I was doing that, but I was
not in the sense
I wasn't
that
present.
Most people are able to do so, right?
Yeah. I was just doing it because for the kids. But I wasn't. I'm like, all I wanted to be was a mom, and here I am, like...
You're having to navigate.
Yeah, now my kids are 12 and 11, and I'm like, what happened? Like, and that happens for everybody. You're all of a sudden, you blink, and your kids are all grown up. But it's like...
But there's normally not something like this thrown in.
Yeah, that just...
that just takes...
Like you said, it was like a pause.
Yeah.
And then like, at what point do you unpause and like get on with like the life that you expected you were going to have with your kids? And it's
right, because you said you still have so many things from that time in your life that I don't know how you do get past them. I mean, I guess, and I guess it's with anything, you just learn how to cope. Like you said, with the anxiety, and I'm sure it's always in the back of your mind that she's going to get sick again. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. Every time she gets like...
Just even probably a sniffle or something.
Yeah, or like a stomach virus or something. It's like my other kids, I'm like, you're fine.
Right.
And her, I'm like, let's take her to the hospital right now.
Right.
Yeah. Because, throughout I told the brief summary of like her treatment, but I planned her funeral quite a few times. Like there was so many times when I was just like, okay, this is it. One time it was a bloody nose from the chemo caused her platelets to get so low that her blood couldn't clot. And she she had a bloody nose, and she ended up, it was like hours and hours of blood pouring out of her face. And then she was like limp, and all of a sudden they took her to the ICU, and I'm like, my kid's going to die from a bloody nose.
Yeah.
There was several times like that where I envisioned her funeral.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I'm like still trying to make sure that like the kids go to preschool.
Right. Right.
So it was like a roller coaster, I guess. I don't know. But like I said, like it was, it was a lot of holding your breath and waiting for like, just going through the motions, I guess. And then looking back, it's like I missed out on a lot just going through the motions.
Yeah. And so, and I can imagine at that time too, you probably saw your other friends. How was that? You know, like if they had children and they were living a normal life, I'm sure you had some sort of resentment or.
Maybe. I mean, I think at the time I don't know.
You probably didn't even have time to think about it then.
Yeah. Or again, like that was an emotion that you would have,
and you just didn't.
And if I
Which
did,
is probably
I just sort
good.
of suppressed them. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, there were times when I would be like, this isn't fair.
Yeah.
Like, but
You're still going through it, and
and it's like,
I know.
I wouldn't trade having her. So
Right.
It
Right.
just, people are like, how'd you do it? Like, I don't know how you did it. And it's just like, you just do it.
Yeah.
Like you did there's no other option.
So that you probably got tired of hearing that a couple of times,
not really. It's just,
okay.
it's just like, there's not really an answer for it. It's
Yeah.
just like, you would do the same thing as sort of the answer.
Yes.
But but it's heavy. Like that whole, you having to stay strong. It's like, and people are always like, you're so strong. And people would say things like, God only
It gives you what you can handle. Yes.
And it's like,
really?
yeah, like, oh.
That's what I felt anyway.
So that's my reward for being a strong mom.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Like, no,
It doesn't
I don't
make
think
much
so.
sense.
I think it makes you strong
Yes. Yes. 100%.
because you have to be. That's your only option.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So. And then it's like, I don't want to be strong. I want to be an emotional wreck.
Right.
I want to I want to.
Yes.
Cry
At
and-
that point in time, you would take anything else, I'm sure, of, oh gosh. Okay.
So you've mentioned, we've what a wonderful story. And thank you so much for sharing.
Amazing.
But for someone who might be starting this journey and just I couldn't imagine just the overwhelming, especially if you're looking down the road, long term, like, oh my gosh, we're going to be here for a year and how are we going to survive this? Positivity, you said. I heard you say, get your emotions out, not in front of your kids, but somehow.
Journal them. Like journal about what you're feeling so that you can stay in touch with your feeling. And I think I had a hard time understanding that you can be strong and also need help, or you can be strong and also be upset about the circumstance. So you can be strong and also, break down every now and then. Like, you don't have to just be strong. Like,
Another thing I heard was the doctors might tell you one thing, but don't stop there.
Oh yeah, because you were the advocate for her. It sounds like in what you were saying, you didn't accept what they had to say, and you.
Yeah.
Or you wanted more information. That wasn't enough for you to believe that was all there was.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it was, but like I needed to, I needed to.
And I wonder too, because of your background, because, in nursing, you know, that you knew stuff, right? And so the average person going in, they don't, if they're not in that medical field, they may not know that.
Yeah. And so I did think about that sometimes. Like what would have happened if I didn't know any better, or I didn't think, if I just put all my trust into the first doctor,
Right.
Because I think he had her best interest in mind. I don't think that he,
Oh, of course. Yeah.
like I truly think that he did think that was her best option. Yeah. And
And you had mentioned too, there was just something that was telling you that was not the route
and I don't
to go.
think it was I don't think it was my nursing background. I think it was just
it was just your
gut, like
your
your
gut.
mom, like your mother, your mom instincts. Because there was a part of me too that like a lot of times like they would not just people in general, like during the whole thing, because I was a nurse, it would be like, well, like you should be able to know what to choose. And I'm like, these aren't like, and even like with her dad, like it'd be like, well, you like, what are we gonna do? Like, are we gonna take her here? Are we gonna take her here? Are we gonna go to this doctor? Are we gonna have the surgery? And he's like, well, you're a nurse, like you can pick. And I'm like, I don't want to pick all the time,
right?
Because what if I don't pick the right thing,
right?
It's a lot of pressure.
But
yeah,
it's like you have to. And
to.
So a lot of the decisions were like terrifying to make. But you just do.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, sometimes I would just have to just realize that I didn't have control over it. And so
being an advocate too, I think is something you would probably say, right?
Yeah, because that you do have control over. You don't have control over a lot of things, and I think that was a hard part, is like losing control over, when you're a parent of small kids, like not that like you want all the control, but like you are in control, and so like when all this happens, it's like there's everything's out of your control, but you can research other options, I don't know if I slept during the whole 4 years, because if I wasn't like trying to keep things normal for the kids and plan play dates and trips and things to do that are normal, I was also researching different options. I was researching different diets and alternative things that I could do at home for her, and it's good because that's all I had control over. And so, but then you got to let go of the things that you can't control.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Man alive. This is amazing. Like,
yes. Thank you so much.
And again, like, I don't feel amazing. Like, I just feel like a mom. Like, I just feel like I just did, did what any mom would do.
Well, I know that this is gonna just, anybody listening is gonna, even if they take one little bit of what you've said, it's very powerful. And your mindset that you had, and I think everything that you were able to provide for Isla is just, it really is just amazing. Like you should, I know that you think I'm just a mom and I did everything that I had to do, but not everybody's story turns out this way. And I don't know, I'm in awe.
So how can we help you? Is there any charities that you really want people to maybe look at, or would you like anybody to check you out on any social media platforms, or like to follow your story? Like, what can we do for you?
First, I want her just quickly just to share, tell us about Isla really quick. Like she's how old? She's 11 now.
She's getting ready to start middle school. She's 11 years old. She looks like she's 6, but she acts like she's 65.
Yes.
She tries to parent me sometimes.
Wise beyond her years, right?
Yeah, she gets along with adults more than she does with the kids her own age. But she's got, like, she's just resilient.
Yeah.
Like, she's just, and it's like, it's like the definition of resilience is being able to kind of bend and just, adapt and she
and that's what she's done her entire life.
Yeah, she's like, if one person can do this, then, and I want to do it, then I'm going to do it too. So she when she was right before she turned 2, she was in the hospital, and that was one of the times, the really scary hospitalizations, where we were planning her second birthday party, and I truly didn't know if we would actually make it to her second birthday, but we were planning this party, and she wanted a tippy toes party. She wanted a ballet party. So she kept saying,
they call it tippy toes.
Tippy toes. I want to do tippy toes. I want to do tippy toes. So we had a birthday party at a dance studio, and she and she like fell in love with it. And she was like, I want to go back and do tippy toes. So we put her in a class, and it was like, it was a once a week class, and she would go maybe once a month.
Yeah.
But when she was there, she was normal. And so like the little kids that were in her class, they were all 2.5, 2. And so they didn't even notice that she was bald and had like tubes hanging out of her chest, and she's all scrawny. They just danced with her, and like they didn't ask any questions about her. She was normal there.
Yeah.
And so that's where she wanted to be when she was not in the hospital. And she's still to this day, that's where she wants to be. And she dances with an older age group too, because she's like, I don't want to dance with these little kids. I want to dance with like these girls.
Yeah.
And she's like, they can do it, I can do it. So she just pushes herself and yeah. And she's like, this is what I want to do, so I'm going to do it. And yeah.
So she's thriving right now.
She is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And she has issues. Like she still has, but she still, it's like, yeah, she has to take medication every day, and she knows she's going to have a couple more surgeries, but it's just like, so what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah, because she's been through the worst of the worst, right?
Yeah, but she remembers like her favorite nurses, and she remembers the music therapists, and she remembers the friends that she made. She doesn't like. We'll ask her sometimes, like, do you remember? And she's got scars all over, and so she'll look at her scars, and it's like, well, what's this one from? And she doesn't even remember some of them. So, and sometimes she's proud of them, and sometimes she just doesn't want you to fuss about them.
Yeah.
Because she's like, I want to be normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she is. She is. If you didn't know, you wouldn't know.
You wouldn't
And
know that.
people are like new people that she meets are always surprised.
Yeah.
They're like, wait, this one? She had cancer? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 times.
Gosh. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, Amy, thank you so much. So much for being here. Yes.
Good to see you guys again.
I know, right? It's been a long time. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Resilience Reborn. And we hope that you continue to listen more and subscribe and listen on all platforms.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for joining us on the Resilience Reborn podcast. We hope today's stories provided you hope and inspiration to always be resilient.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing to our channel. You can also interact with us on our Facebook community page, which you can find by searching Resilience Reborn on Facebook.
Remember, through resilience and recovery, you are never alone.
Together, we grow stronger. See you next time.